Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to have a look at the formation of the SIG. So the SIG, the Special Interrogation Group, is set up during the Second World War in the Desert Campaign. It's not a lot of most of the guys in it are actually part of the SAS, and when the SIG is disbanded, they rejoin the SAS. But it is a separate entity for as far as we're concerned. It's actually quite similar in the way it's set up to the SAS, or it's almost like a mirror of the SAS. So Lindy Beige has a fantastic video on the SAS. But essentially, David Sterling of the SAS, he comes up with an idea, gives it to his superiors. They approve it. He then implements sort of this. He gets the guys together, gets some equipment, uniform, goes on a mission, which fails, but anyway, and then modifies the idea until he gets something up and running. The way the SIG is formed is the officer who founds it basically does a thing, and then they go, well, that's quite impressive. Can you actually get away with doing that? And they found, yes, that you could, and then a whole bunch of other intel which didn't really have any purpose, like the fact that, oh, that'll be a little challenge. I'll put a little challenge at the start of the video. But a lot of intel that previously had been disregarded suddenly comes straight to the forefront. They went, okay, good. So we have an idea that works. So we have a thing that works. We have a whole bunch of intel we can use to supplement that idea. And now we have someone who's actually capable of pulling it off. Let's make a unit and throw it out there. So it's actually, it almost comes from the reverse, sort of the SAS is idea, implementation, execution, reformation, whereas this is basically execution, reformation, idea, execution. Like it's sort of backwards thinking, and it works out fine. So I'll sort of talk about a challenge. I'll give you a little challenge. Quite a few members of the SIG were Jewish, and it was not a deliberate effort to recruit Jewish people for the SIG, but it just so happened that a giant chunk of the people I had to draw from were Jewish. So see if you can figure out why the SIG operating in North Africa may have had a large pool of not primarily, but see if you can figure out why the SIG operating in North Africa had a group of people, many of whom were Jewish, to draw from. See if you can figure that out. So how does it start? Well, we have Captain Henry Cecil Buck of the 5th Battalion, 1st Punjabi Regiment. That's a Punjabi soldier there. They're not Sikhs. Sikhs have the sort of crisscross turban. That's how you can tell a Sikh turban from any other type of turban. It's got like a little like a chevron type pattern. Punjabi has sort of like a little cone type hat thing at the top. There's a particular Punjabi. If you want to build Punjabis or Sikhs, you actually use the Warlord 8th Army box. That's sort of the best way to do it. I think Perry might even have hits. Anyway, it's not relevant. So we are with Captain Buck at near Derna, where he has 2 companies of men, supported by a sort of a battery of guns of 25 pounders and sort of a unit of not really specifically size. The size isn't really given, but a group of 6 pounders. Is it 1 battery? Is it 2? Anyway, and he's basically given 24 hours to have his division, I believe the 4th Indian or something like that, the 4th Division, of which he is a part. He's basically their rear guard, and he spends the next day or 2 holding off the Germans. Now, it's not the entire German army like being held off by 2 companies, but a scouting company throws them back, gets assaulted by maybe a half battalion size thing, or a depleted battalion throws them back, and he and his men they're doing well, but at sort of twilight on the last day, they're very, very tired, thirsty, that sort of thing. And they see a whole bunch of British tanks and British lorries and that sort of thing coming towards them. And they think, okay, this is the desert. Communication is awful. We haven't been able to raise HQ in a day or 2, no ages. The army is retreating, so it's chaos. And clearly a British unit has basically got lost, advanced forward, and is now retreating back. The British units, British everything. And they just stand there until they get about 500 meters away. 400 meters away, when a couple of gentlemen look over and they see, whoa, that's not what you want to see in the back of a British lorry, a Stahlhelm and a bunch of those cork helmets and a bunch of DAC uniforms. The DAC had actually got a bunch of British tanks and British lorries and had driven them at the position and did take the position. There was about 15 minutes of fighting, 10-15 minutes. A platoon of men managed to surrender, and the rest basically either fled and probably died, or were killed, or badly wounded. So Captain Buck surrenders, and within 72 hours he will be a free man again. But there's a story in the middle. So Captain Buck surrenders. He is taken to a POW camp. He is taken to a German one, but he is also like in very close proximity to an Italian camp. It looks like it might even be a mixed POW camp, because he meets Lieutenant McRae, a Scotsman who we will see later. Lieutenant McRae and Captain Buck basically come up with a plan. The two of them are going to break out. Buck is actually a gentleman. He went to Oxford, where he studied philosophy and all sorts of other nice things. He grew up in India. He was born in Surrey, but he grew up in India with his father, who was a colonel of an Indian regiment, and he basically got put into an Indian regiment as well. It's actually funny. There's a quote given about how he was not a very soldierly type man, and his CO really didn't like him very much, which is actually the exact same thing that was said about David Sterling, the founder of the SAS. So, for obvious reasons, I think it seems that people who are generally not good soldiers make very good irregular commanders, which is something we see throughout all of history, that people who don't really follow the rules very well, people who don't really commit themselves 100% to these sort of things, they are generally quite good at irregular command. So, anyway, it's a bit of a tangent. So, McRae and Buck, I'll call him Buck, Henry Cecil Buck. I think Buck might be the best name to take there. So, Captain Buck and Lieutenant McRae get permission to have a shower together. It's quite weird. Or use the showers at the same time at night. I'm not entirely sure why. It's probably because they were officers and the Germans just figured that they wanted to, maintain some dignity or something. And so, they didn't want to shower with the men. And so McRae and Buck go into the showers, which just happen to be on the very edge of the camp, and they smash a hole in the wall. So, quite not very nice of them to do to these nice German fellows who've given them a shower and all that. But, this is actually where Buck becomes quite cynical. And basically, they use tricks against me, so therefore there are no rules anymore. F your rules. I can now do whatever I want because you broke the rules. Obviously not. He doesn't actually go to the extent of ever executing people, at least not now. Later it gets dark, but so he's basically saying that there are no more gentlemanly rules. There are still moral rules, like they're not going to kill unarmed men, at least now. But there are no more gentlemanly rules, which is kind of like the early part of what happened in the Bush War in Rhodesia, except that went friggin' all the way to no rules. But this is there's no gentleman rules, no uniform type rules. So they bust down this wall and they sneak out of the camp. They actually come across an Italian armoured unit, which is moving across. Italian arm. I put the thing up there because Italian arm is not great. It comes up later. It's not fantastic. So they sort of sneak past this Italian armoured unit, which is not hard. And they find a whole bunch of German uniforms, like out for washing. They've been abandoned, thrown away because they're just junk. So they basically scavenge together 2 German officer uniforms of some kind. German officers actually like to wear the Italian jackets, so the fact that this was like a mixed Italian-German sort of unit was quite good. In Hans von Luck's book, Panzer Commander, he actually talks about when he first came to North Africa, the first thing he was told to do by his sort of subordinate officers who had been there for a while was immediately throw that awful German thing away, find yourself an Italian jacket, and put your pants out in the sun for a few days and fade the colour a bit so people don't think you're a raw recruit. So they managed to scavenge some German uniforms with a sort of German hat, and they actually found an old rifle. It's not really explained where they got the rifle from. I imagine that in a military camp you're going to sort of get a rifle from somewhere. They had a little bit of ammunition for it, but not much. And our man Buck has a spanner. He puts a spanner in his pocket, and he goes off to steal a truck. And Buck can speak fluent German. He actually sounds like a German when he speaks German. He can also speak quite a lot of Arabic languages, which helps him. So before they steal the truck, they basically wander through the desert for a day or two. They find a Bedouin camp, and he speaks sort of Arabic with the Bedouin. They stay there for the night. The Bedouin says, well, look, there's a German road they frequently use here. Head out to the road, and at night, they find just a truck driving along at night by itself, which is apparently a very common thing that happened. Who knew? I generally would have thought they had a group, but no, it was a single truck. And And Buck comes out. Buck's standing there by himself. McRae is behind a little rock with the gun, and Buck is standing there by himself. He waves the man down, and he basically goes up and is like, what are you doing here? Where are you going? And he says, well, I'm going to a military base down there, an army camp, like 5 miles down the road. And he says, well, show me your pass. You have to show me your pass if you're out here. And the guy doesn't seem to question why there's just an officer standing in the middle of nowhere. And as he fumbles for his pass down here, Buck gets the wrench, and instead of just smashing the guy in the back of the head, he actually pretends that it's a gun. He holds it in such a way that in the darkness, you could probably... Remember, there's no like internal cab light or anything using the headlights. He sort of looks like he's holding a pistol. And then McRae comes out with the rifle, and basically they demand the truck, which they get. They tie the man up and then leave him by the side of the road in a position where in the morning he'll be quite easily seen and rescued, but at night he won't be. So they did have a chance to kill the guy, but they didn't, because it's actually quite hard to kill someone like that in that kind of position. Even the SAS wouldn't do things like that. Like they wouldn't. David Sterling actually rebuked, was it Paddy Mayne, the psychopath who was in the SAS, for killing people. Not in this case, but for killing people like that. Anyway, so leave the guy tied up. They do this again, like the next time they steal a truck too. So they tie him up, leave him on the road, and they take the truck back to this sort of German army base, where they find that they need fuel. They need about a full tank of fuel to get back to the British lines, and they abandon the truck. They then sort of travel around the base, because they don't want to go through it, because while Buck can speak German, he doesn't have any paperwork, and McRae can't speak German at all. He's a Scotsman. He just kind of barely speak English. So they go around the camp, circumvent it, and basically set themselves up on a road to do a thing again, and they see a car driving past, just a staff car type thing. Like, awesome. Well, we'll take the staff car, that'd be much faster. People will just wave us by, because officers in the staff car, no one's going to stop them. So Buck flanks the staff car down, and there's like 12 officers in it, or 6 or 7 officers in the staff car. He's like, oh, yeah, okay. We're not going to be able to steal that. Oh, sorry, sir, you can go on by. And then a truck comes past with 2 men, and they're basically saying, well, we're just driving down this road to do a thing. This is not important. And they steal that car too, leave the men tied up on the side of the road, and this is the funny part, they actually fall in with a German column. They fall in with just a column of tanks and vehicles. No one has bats an eye when they actually just drive out of the desert into the column. No one checks their paperwork the entire day. The checkpoints they go through, no one stops them, because you don't want to stop every vehicle in the whole column. No one seems any suspicious about this at all. And in their sort of travels through this camp, this next sort of camp and this next sort of area, they managed to get another 7 or 8 or 9 POWs. Like there was an RAF pilot who'd been shot down. There were a few other guys. There was a few POWs, a few officers, a few enlisted men. And they get about 9 or 10 of them, and they dress them all as Germans, stick them in the back of this truck, and then, again, no one stops them doing this. They just drive off into the night, into the desert. No one stops them. Which is a frequent theme throughout this whole book, by the way. And quite a lot of other World War II, I don't want to say espionage, but sort of the books that relate to this type of thing, is that the security is actually quite lax. If you're wearing a uniform and you look like you know what you're doing, people generally don't stop you. Again, Lindy Bage's video on the SAS, that comes up, where they literally walk boats down into a dock to blow up some ships, and then they have to walk the boats out through the main gate, and no one even questions it. Anyway. So they arrive back in the British lines, and Captain Buck, walks over by himself to the British lines to some very extremely paranoid and confused Tommies, who put him in a staff car, bundle him off to HQ, who then put him in another staff car and sent him to Cairo, where he is given the military cross by Sir Dudley Clark himself. Well, he's recommended for the military cross by Sir Dudley Clark, who runs MI9, which is the POW rescue type unit. It's also he's also running a lot of intelligence operations in the Middle East. Sir Dudley Clark, very famous Middle Eastern espionage type character in the Second World War. Oh, something I forgot to mention. At one point during the escape, they come across a German airfield, and there's no way for them to get around this airfield without being spotted, but they get a stroke of luck because the RAF decides to bomb the airfield, and as the airfield's being bombed, they sprint across it and manage to get to the other side of it and get to safety. That's really This would make quite a good movie, just this escape portion, let alone all the other. You could make like a whole series of movies about this. But yeah, they're just two guys running across an airfield as bombs are going off. It's very interesting, very cool. I mentioned before about a few of these men were Jewish. Now, Clark and McCree were not, and none of the guys they picked up were. But this is where I talked about, this is where Dudley Clark gets this idea. Well, this thing works. You can dress up as Germans if you speak German, or at least some of the men speak German, fluently, as in native German. Buck is said to basically have speak the language like a local, or like someone who, remember there's very regional dialects. He speaks it enough for Italians and Germans to believe he's German. So if you have a guy in an officer's uniform who is German sounding, he can take men dressed as Germans, even if they don't speak a word of the language, through the German lines, basically with impunity. And if we gave them the right paperwork, if we gave them the right training, this would be a way for us to insert the SAS and the LRDG and the other sort of special type units into German lines, rather than having to sort of sneak through or just hell for leather guns blazing straight through it. We can actually insert our men into a German unit to do something. I wonder what that Operation Caravan, as we're going to see later, is basically this plan coming into fruition. So this is where the idea comes from. So it's execution, it's in action, and now this idea is coming along. But to make the idea work, they need German speakers, preferably actual Germans. It turns out that almost all the Germans were tied up with this thing called the German Army and the German Navy and the German Air Force, and not a lot of Germans were willing to join the British Army, Navy and Air Force. However, there were a lot of Czechoslovakians, there were a lot of Poles, there were a lot of insert country X here who speaks German or has some sort of language of German, knowledge of German languages or a similar language to German. There are a lot of free forces serving in the British Army already who spoke something close to German or German itself. It had to actually be, you couldn't have a guy speaking Polish. You had to actually have like maybe a Polish family who had grown up speaking German in their sort of town. Maybe it was a Czechoslovakian who spoke German, or like a German type Czech who was anti-Nazi, something like that. And then they found this other community, and this community was actually found by this part's a little creepy. This isn't. I can't approve of this, and I don't believe anyone at the time would have approved of this either. This is quite creepy behaviour. As Captain Buck was, this is earlier. This was a year or two earlier. Captain Buck was driving around Palestine. It would become Israel in 48 or whatever. But Buck is. I'm not going to get into that at all. Buck was driving around Palestine, and he saw a 13-year-old girl and her friend hitchhiking, and he picked them up and gave them a lift, which is creepy. And then the 13-year-old girl invited him back to her house, which is also creepy, which he accepted, which is creepy. But it's okay because he hit on her sister, who basically wanted nothing to do with him. That I don't know why that was included in the book. It was just funny. Probably because he did come off as quite a creep, but it's okay because he was into the 18-year-old. He was like 22 or 23, so it's not that bad. And he gets to know the family just over dinner. And he finds out that they came to the area in 1933. It turns out they came to the area in 1933 because of an election that was held in Germany, or a whole bunch of elections that were held in Germany. They took like 10 or 12 to actually get them into power. When a certain gentleman with a little moustache took over in Germany during 1933. And there was actually a program of deportation, of relocation, I guess you could call it. There's actually a medal made up with I know there's certain words that you can't say on YouTube or stuff happens to you. I'm not sure what those are. I doubt they'll affect me, but you know, the sort of bad guy symbol of the Second World War and the Star of David on the other side. I would love to actually get one of those because that is such an interesting thing. Obviously this would not continue. Anyone who believes in the Madagascar policy is delusional. Anyway, so there were quite a few Jewish families living in Palestine. And let's just say that they were not fans of the German army, spoke fluent German, and quite a few of them had actually already joined the British Army. So they had a pool of men to draw from. Men who could speak German, men who were Germans, and men who despised the German state, not because of political things, well, you could say it's political, but if somebody hates your religion and your race or whatever, that goes beyond politics. That a natural enemy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend type deal. That's not true ever. That's very rarely true. In this case, it actually is. So I'll leave it there. The SIG is being formed. They have German speakers with German uniforms. All they need now... Well, okay, so you can't just rock up in a German uniform and then salute like a British officer and walk like a British officer and even walk like a German officer. Or, walk like a British soldier. You can't talk like a British soldier does. Even if you're speaking German, the slang is different. Regional slang is different, so not even from home. In Africa, there would be different regional slang. So they might, like a Tommy Cooker, I believe they call the Shermans Tommy Cookers. How would you know that unless you actually had a German? So they had to find a way to teach themselves or to be taught by someone the eccentricities and the local lingo of the DAK, the Deutsch Afrika Korps. It's not Dutch Afrika Korps. I keep hearing that over and over again by people. The Dutch Afrika Korps. What the hell? No, it's the Deutsch German Afrika Korps. German. That's like the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. It's like National Sozialistische Deutsche Apparatche Party or something like that. I butchered that, but you know what I mean. The D stands for German, not Dutch. Anyway, that's just a weird thing that I always hear again and again. It really drives me insane. Anyway, so they need German trainers, but where are they going to find them? Well, come back next episode and find out. So I'm going to do an end card for the first time. I'll see how these work. If you enjoyed that video, make sure you check out the channel below. If you want to find out more about the Second World War, there'll be more videos in the playlist. You can hit the button, is it there or there? It's one of those places, there's like a playlist button down there. Yeah, hit subscribe, hit like, leave a comment. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll make sure to answer them. If you have a topic you'd like to see covered on the channel, put it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. If you know something interesting that the SIG got up to, this is going to cover Operation Caravan, but if you know some other operations that they were involved in, I would love to cover those as well. If members of your family were involved in the SIG, if you know of any SIG type stories, put them in the comments below and we'll grow this information of the SIG. So I'm gonna get back to that audiobook and get back to writing all my notes down, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.